You're watching your dog sleep on the floor beside you, their paws twitching, their whiskers quivering, soft whimpers escaping from their throat. What's happening behind those closed eyelids? What world are they experiencing in this moment? Perhaps they're chasing something, or maybe they're reliving the walk you took together this morning. The truth is, your dog's mind is far more complex and fascinating than most of us ever imagine. Welcome to Bedtime Biology, where science meets serenity. Each night, we explore the quiet wonders of the natural world, calming your mind and sparking your curiosity. Tonight, we're stepping into a world that exists right beside us, yet remains largely invisible. We're going inside the canine mind. Over thousands of years, dogs have become our most intimate animal companions, sharing our homes, our routines, and even our beds. They've evolved alongside us in ways no other species has, and through this extraordinary journey, their minds have developed capabilities that continue to surprise scientists. From reading our gestures better than our closest primate relatives, to detecting diseases we can't see, to remembering events from their past, dogs possess cognitive abilities that challenge our understanding of animal intelligence. Some of these abilities seem almost magical. Others remind us that dogs experience the world in fundamentally different ways than we do. The story of how dogs think is a story of evolution, of adaptation, of the remarkable ways that two very different species learned to understand each other. It's a story told through cutting-edge neuroscience, through careful behavioral studies, through MRI scans of sleeping dogs, and through the simple observations of researchers who've dedicated their lives to understanding our four-legged friends. As we drift through this exploration tonight, you'll discover that the mind of a dog is neither a simple machine responding to stimuli, nor a furry human in disguise. It's something wonderfully unique, shaped by its own evolutionary pressures, its own needs, its own way of perceiving reality. So, settle in, relax, and let's begin our journey into the canine mind, starting where all thoughts begin, with the brain itself. The brain of a dog, if you could hold one in your hands, would feel surprisingly familiar. It would have the same basic structure as yours, the same general organization, the same fundamental components. The cerebrum, the cerebellum, the brainstem, all present and accounted for. Under a microscope, the neurons would look remarkably similar, firing electrical signals, forming connections, creating the substrate of thought and experience. This similarity isn't coincidental. Dogs and humans are both mammals, and we share a long evolutionary history. The basic blueprint of the mammalian brain was established hundreds of millions of years ago, long before dogs and humans went their separate ways. Yet, despite these similarities, there are crucial differences that shape everything about how a dog experiences the world. First, there's the matter of size. A typical dog brain weighs between 60 and 80 grams, roughly the size of a lemon. A human brain weighs about 1,400 grams. But raw size doesn't tell the whole story. When you adjust for body size, the ratio of brain to body mass, dogs fall somewhere in the middle range for mammals. They're not at the top, like dolphins or humans, but they're far from the bottom. More important than overall size is how the brain is organized, which regions are enlarged, which neural pathways are most developed. In a human brain, about 5% of the total volume is dedicated to processing odors. In a dog's brain, that figure jumps to roughly 33%. This single statistic explains so much about how differently dogs perceive reality. While humans are primarily visual creatures, navigating the world through sight, dogs are olfactory creatures first and foremost. The world they experience is painted primarily in scents, in chemical signatures, in invisible trails of information that we humans barely notice. The olfactory bulb in a dog's brain, the region that receives signals from the nose and processes smell information, is proportionally enormous. It connects directly to the limbic system, the ancient part of the brain involved in emotion and memory. This direct connection explains why dogs seem to associate scents so powerfully with memories and feelings. A particular smell doesn't just provide information. It evokes experiences, emotions, entire narratives of past events. Recent studies using functional MRI scans have allowed scientists to peer inside the thinking brains of awake, unrestrained dogs. This breakthrough came about through patient training. Researchers at Emory University, led by Gregory Burns, developed techniques to train dogs to walk into an MRI machine and hold completely still while their brain activity was measured. No sedation, no restraints, just willing cooperation from dogs who had learned that the loud, strange environment of an MRI scanner was safe. These studies revealed something remarkable. When dogs smell the scent of their owner, specific regions of their brain light up with activity. The caudate nucleus, a region associated with positive expectations and reward processing, shows particularly strong activation. The same region activates in human brains when we see photos of people we love. This suggests that dogs experience something genuinely emotional when they encounter their owner's scent. Not just recognition, but something deeper, something that might be akin to what we would call affection or joy. The visual processing areas of a dog's brain are less developed than ours, but this doesn't mean dogs see poorly. Rather, they see differently. Dogs have fewer cones in their retinas, the cells responsible for color vision, which means they see the world in a more limited color palette, primarily blues and yellows. What looks red to us might appear brownish or grayish to a dog. But dogs have more rods, the cells responsible for detecting motion and seeing in low light. This makes them exquisitely sensitive to movement, far better than we are at spotting the twitch of a squirrel's tail 50 yards away, or detecting a person approaching in dim light. The sections of the dog brain dedicated to processing social information, particularly information about humans, show unusual development. Domestication, it seems, didn't just change dogs' behavior, it reshaped their brains. When researchers compare the brains of dogs to their closest living relatives, wolves, they find differences in gene expression, in neural connectivity, in the very structure of certain brain regions. These changes affect how dogs process social cues, how they respond to human attention, how they learn from watching us. One fascinating discovery involves the corpus callosum, the bundle of nerve fibers connecting the two hemispheres of the brain. In dogs, certain portions of the corpus callosum show enhanced connectivity compared to wolves. This may facilitate the rapid integration of information from different brain regions, allowing dogs to quickly combine sensory input, emotional response, and learned associations. When a dog hears your car pull into the driveway, their brain must rapidly process the sound, recognize it as familiar, access memories associated with your arrivals, trigger an emotional response, and initiate the excited behavior you see when you walk through the door. All of this happens in seconds, requiring seamless communication across different brain systems. The prefrontal cortex, the region at the front of the brain involved in planning, decision-making, and impulse control, is less developed in dogs than in humans. This doesn't mean dogs can't make decisions or control their impulses, but it does suggest these abilities work differently. A dog's decision-making appears to be more immediate, more tied to the present moment, less concerned with abstract future consequences. This makes sense evolutionarily. For a hunting, scavenging animal, the ability to respond quickly to opportunities and threats would be more valuable than the ability to plan months ahead. Yet dogs can learn remarkably complex sequences of behavior. Service dogs can be trained to perform dozens of different tasks in response to specific cues or situations. Herding dogs can learn to respond to subtle whistle commands from hundreds of yards away. Detection dogs can identify specific scents among thousands of competing odors. All of this requires not just learning, but memory, pattern recognition, and the ability to generalize from training to real-world situations. The brain systems supporting these abilities must be sophisticated indeed. Studies examining the heritability of cognitive traits in dogs suggest that somewhere between 40 and 50% of the variation in certain cognitive abilities, like following pointing gestures or paying attention to human faces, can be attributed to genetic factors. This is remarkably similar to the heritability of intelligence in humans. It tells us that while learning and experience matter enormously, there's also a biological foundation, a cognitive architecture that dogs are born with, shaped by thousands of generations of evolution. The dog brain also shows interesting patterns in how it processes different types of information. When researchers played recordings of human voices to dogs while monitoring their brain activity, they found that the dogs' brains showed left hemisphere dominance for processing familiar human voices and right hemisphere dominance for processing unfamiliar voices. Humans show similar patterns. This suggests a deep parallel in how our two species process social information, a convergent evolution of neural systems for understanding the voices of others. Sleep studies reveal that dogs experience similar stages of sleep as humans, including both slow-wave sleep and rapid eye movement sleep. During these different stages, different patterns of neural activity occur. Patterns associated with memory consolidation, emotional processing, and the integration of new learning with existing knowledge. The sleeping brain is not idle. It's actively working, sorting through the experiences of the day, strengthening important connections, weakening others, maintaining the complex network that makes thought and behavior possible. As dogs age, their brains change, just as human brains do. Older dogs show changes in brain structure visible on MRI scans, including some shrinkage of the hippocampus, a region crucial for forming new memories. They may develop deposits of amyloid protein, similar to what occurs in human Alzheimer's disease. These changes correlate with cognitive decline, with decreased ability to learn new tasks, with disorientation and confusion. Yet, not all old dogs experience severe cognitive decline. Just as some humans maintain sharp minds well into their 90s, some dogs remain cognitively vibrant throughout their lives. The canine brain, then, is a finely tuned instrument, shaped by evolution for the specific challenges dogs face. It's a brain built for social living, for rapid response to sensory information, for learning from both success and failure. It's a brain that processes scent with extraordinary sophistication while seeing the world in muted colors. It's a brain that can learn to understand human communication in ways that still surprise researchers. And it's a brain that, despite being much smaller than ours, creates a rich inner life, an experiencing self that we're only beginning to understand. To truly appreciate how a dog thinks, though, we need to understand the single most important sense that shapes their perception of reality. We need to explore the world as dogs experience it, through the extraordinarily sensitive instrument of their nose. Imagine for a moment that you could smell with the sensitivity of a dog. The world would transform utterly. Every person would be surrounded by an invisible cloud of scent, unique and recognizable from across a room, or even across a street. You would smell what someone ate for breakfast hours ago, whether they were stressed or relaxed, whether they had recently been near other animals or certain plants. Every surface would tell a story in scent. The sidewalk would be a newspaper, recording in chemical traces the passage of every person, every dog, every interesting event of the day. The air itself would become information-rich, carrying messages about the environment, about approaching weather, about distant events. This is closer to how dogs experience reality. Their sense of smell operates at a level so far beyond ours that it's almost like a different sense entirely. While we live primarily in a world of sights and sounds, dogs inhabit a world of scents, a universe of chemical information that's largely invisible to us, but exquisitely detailed to them. The numbers alone are staggering. Dogs have approximately 300 million olfactory receptors in their noses. Humans have about 6 million. That's 50 times more receptors, but the difference in capability is even more dramatic. Studies suggest that dogs can detect odors at concentrations between 10,000 and 100,000 times lower than what humans can detect. Some researchers suggest the true figure might be even higher. A bloodhound, the breed with perhaps the most sensitive nose, might be able to detect certain odors at concentrations 100 million times lower than the human detection threshold. But raw sensitivity is only part of the story. The architecture of a dog's nose is a marvel of biological engineering. When a dog sniffs, they're not simply drawing air into their lungs. The airflow splits into two separate pathways. The majority of the air travels to the lungs for breathing, but a portion travels to a region at the back of the nasal cavity, a special area lined with olfactory epithelium, the tissue containing those hundreds of millions of scent receptors. This dedicated scent processing chamber allows dogs to analyze odors without being overwhelmed by the constant influx of air needed for breathing. The structure of this olfactory chamber increases the surface area available for scent detection. It's folded and convoluted, packed with thin, delicate structures called turbinates that create a labyrinth for air to travel through. As air moves through this labyrinth, scent molecules dissolve in the moist mucus lining the turbinates and bind to receptor cells. Each receptor cell is specialized to respond to particular molecular shapes, particular chemical structures. When the right molecule binds to a receptor, it triggers an electrical signal that travels along the olfactory nerve to the olfactory bulb in the brain. The olfactory bulb doesn't just passively receive these signals. It begins processing them, comparing patterns, filtering out background noise, enhancing contrast between different odors. This processed information then flows to multiple brain regions, Some signals go to the limbic system, connecting scent directly to emotion and memory. Others go to the cortex, where more analytical processing occurs, where dogs can, in effect, think about what they're smelling. Dogs also possess a structure that humans lack entirely, a chemosensory organ called the vomeronasal organ, or Jacobson's organ. Located at the base of the nasal cavity, this specialized structure detects pheromones, chemical signals used for communication between animals. When you see a dog exhibiting the Fleeman response, curling their upper lip and appearing to taste the air, they're directing scent molecules toward their vomeronasal organ. This organ seems particularly important for social communication, for detecting signals of stress, fear, or reproductive state in other animals. The capability this olfactory system provides is difficult for humans to fully grasp. Dogs can distinguish between identical twins by scent alone. They can tell which direction a scent trail is moving by detecting the subtle differences in how much time has passed since the scent was deposited at different locations. They can identify specific individuals in a crowd, not by sight or sound, but by the unique chemical signature each person carries. Perhaps even more remarkably, dogs can be trained to detect specific target odors amid a chaotic background of competing scents. A dog trained to detect explosives can find trace amounts of explosive residue in a busy airport, despite being surrounded by thousands of people wearing perfume and cologne, despite food smells from restaurants, despite cleaning products and jet fuel and all the other odors that permeate such an environment. The dog's brain can filter out all of this irrelevant information and focus on the specific chemical signature they've been trained to recognize. This capability has led to dogs being used in an extraordinary range of detection tasks. They detect drugs, explosives, and contraband at borders and in prisons. They detect mold and termites in buildings. They find people buried under rubble after earthquakes or lost in wilderness areas. They detect wildlife for conservation research, finding the scat of endangered species that researchers need to study. In recent years, researchers have trained dogs to detect a wide variety of human diseases by scent alone. The medical detection capabilities of dogs seem almost too good to be true, yet study after study confirms them. Dogs have been trained to detect several types of cancer, including breast, lung, ovarian, bladder, and prostate cancer. The detection rates vary by study and by type of cancer, but many studies report accuracy rates above 80%, with some as high as 99%. Dogs can detect cancer in breath samples, in urine samples, in skin oils. They can detect it early, sometimes even before conventional medical tests can find it. Dogs can also detect other diseases and medical conditions. They can sense when a person with diabetes is experiencing dangerous changes in blood sugar, detecting the volatile organic compounds released through the skin when blood sugar rises or falls. Some dogs can alert their diabetic owners to these changes before the person experiences any symptoms, providing time to check blood sugar levels and take corrective action. This can be literally life-saving, especially for people who experience hypoglycemic episodes while sleeping. Dogs have also been trained to detect seizures before they occur in people with epilepsy. The mechanism isn't fully understood. Dogs might be detecting changes in behavior or posture, or they might be smelling biochemical changes that precede a seizure. Either way, the ability to predict a seizure even a few minutes in advance can allow a person to move to a safe location, avoiding injuries from falls during the seizure. During the COVID pandemic, researchers in several countries trained dogs to detect the virus that causes the disease. After just a few weeks of training, dogs could detect COVID-positive samples with remarkable accuracy, sometimes higher than rapid antigen tests. They could screen hundreds of people per hour simply by sniffing samples, or, in some cases, by sniffing people directly. The possibility of using dogs as a rapid screening tool in high-risk environments, like airports or large gatherings, is being actively explored. But dogs don't only use their noses to detect specific substances. They also use scent to navigate social situations, to understand the emotional states of both dogs and humans. Research has shown that dogs can smell human emotions. When people are fearful or stressed, their bodies release different chemical signals than when they're calm or happy. Dogs detect these signals and respond to them. Studies show that dogs behave differently when exposed to samples of human sweat collected during stressful situations, compared to sweat collected during neutral situations. Interestingly, dogs show a preference for which nostril they use, depending on what they're smelling. When encountering novel or potentially threatening scents, dogs preferentially use their right nostril, which sends information to the right hemisphere of the brain, the side more involved in processing threats and negative stimuli. When smelling familiar or pleasant scents, like food or the scent of their owner, they preferentially use their left nostril, sending information to the left hemisphere. This lateralization of scent processing mirrors patterns seen in other aspects of dog cognition and behavior. The olfactory abilities of dogs are not uniform across breeds. While all dogs have vastly superior scent abilities compared to humans, some breeds have been selectively bred for enhanced scenting ability. Bloodhounds, with their long, drooping ears and loose skin around the face, possess adaptations that help trap and concentrate scent. Their ears can drag on the ground, stirring up scent particles. Their loose facial skin can hang down and help funnel scent toward their nose. Beagles, another breed renowned for scenting, share some of these features. Conversely, brachycephalic breeds, those with flat faces like bulldogs or pugs, have reduced olfactory capacity due to their compressed nasal structure. They still have far better scent ability than humans, but they don't match the performance of breeds with longer snouts. This is one of the many health and functional compromises that come with the extreme physical modifications some breeds have undergone. Environmental factors also affect a dog's scenting ability. Humidity generally enhances scent detection because moisture in the air helps scent molecules travel and helps keep the dog's nasal tissue moist, which aids in scent binding to receptors. Very high temperatures can be detrimental, causing dogs to pant more, which can interfere with scenting and lead to dehydration. Wind carries scent, but can also disperse it, making tracking more challenging. Rain can wash scent away, but can also help concentrate it in puddles or low spots. Age affects scenting ability as well. Puppies are born with their sense of smell already functional, and it continues to develop and refine during their early months of life. Peak scenting ability probably occurs in young adult dogs. As dogs age, their olfactory capabilities gradually decline, just as human senses decline with age. Older dogs may struggle with detection tasks that they could easily perform when younger. Perhaps the most profound implication of dogs' olfactory abilities is what it tells us about their subjective experience of the world. When we try to understand how dogs think, we must remember that they live in a world where the most salient, most information-rich sense is one that we barely comprehend. We can see a dog sniffing a fire hydrant and intellectually understand that they're gathering information about which other dogs have been there. But we can't truly imagine what that experience is like. We can't conceive of a world where scent carries as much detailed information as vision does for us. This is why letting your dog sniff on walks is so important for their mental enrichment. To us, it might seem boring, inefficient, a waste of time. We want to walk, to cover ground, to exercise. But for the dog, that sniffing is how they read their environment, how they gather news about their neighborhood, how they engage with their world in the most natural and fulfilling way. Denying a dog the opportunity to sniff is comparable to making a human walk through an art museum with their eyes closed. The dominance of scent in the dog's sensory world fundamentally shapes how they think, how they remember, how they understand cause and effect. Where we might remember events visually as a series of mental images, dogs likely remember them in part through associated scents. The smell of the veterinary clinic triggers anxiety, not just because they remember what happened there, but because the scent itself is part of the memory, inextricably linked to the experience of discomfort or fear. This olfactory worldview also affects how dogs form attachments. Your scent is a crucial part of what makes you recognizable and comforting to your dog. When you're away, items carrying your scent, like a worn shirt, can provide genuine comfort, not just a visual reminder, but a direct olfactory connection to you. When your dog greets you by intensely sniffing you, they're not just saying hello. They're reading the story of where you've been, what you've been doing, who you've been with. They're updating their understanding of you, maintaining their connection to you through the language they understand best. Understanding the primacy of scent in canine cognition gives us a window into how different the subjective experience of being a dog must be from being a human. We share the same world, occupy the same spaces, but we perceive such radically different versions of reality that it's almost as if we live in parallel universes that only occasionally overlap. Yet, there is overlap. There are dimensions of cognition where dogs and humans find common ground, where we can communicate and understand each other in ways that seem almost miraculous. And nowhere is this more evident than in the realm of social cognition, in the remarkable abilities dogs have developed for understanding human behavior and communication. If you've lived with a dog, you've experienced it countless times. You point at a toy across the room, and your dog looks where you're pointing. You pick up your car keys, and your dog runs to the door, knowing a car ride might be coming. You're feeling sad, and your dog seems to sense it, staying close, offering comfort in their presence. These everyday interactions might seem unremarkable, but they represent cognitive abilities that are anything but ordinary. Dogs understand human communication in ways that are, in some respects, more sophisticated than how our closest evolutionary relatives, chimpanzees and bonobos, understand it. This is a startling finding, one that has reshaped our understanding of cognitive evolution. Chimpanzees share about 99% of their DNA with humans. They're capable of complex problem solving, tool use, and social cognition. Yet, when researchers test chimpanzees' ability to follow human pointing gestures, the results are often unimpressive. Many chimps fail to understand that a pointing finger indicates the location of hidden food. Dogs, by contrast, excel at this task. Even puppies as young as 8 weeks old, with minimal exposure to humans, can follow pointing gestures. They understand that when a human points, the gesture conveys information about the location of something interesting. This isn't just responding to any directional movement. Dogs distinguish between intentional pointing and similar motions that aren't meant to communicate anything. They understand the communicative intent behind the gesture. How did dogs develop this ability? The most compelling explanation relates to domestication. Over thousands of years of living alongside humans, dogs that were better at understanding human communication had advantages. They could more effectively beg for food, avoid punishment, participate in cooperative activities like hunting. These dogs were more likely to be tolerated by humans, more likely to be fed and cared for, more likely to reproduce. Over many generations, this selection pressure led to dogs with enhanced social cognitive skills specifically attuned to humans. Research comparing dogs to hand-reared wolves supports this domestication hypothesis. Even wolves raised by humans from puppyhood, given extensive socialization and training, generally don't match dogs' spontaneous ability to follow human pointing. They can learn to do it, but it takes much more training, and they never seem to do it as naturally or flexibly as dogs do. The difference appears to be genetic, a product of the evolutionary process of domestication. Studies of the genes involved in dog social behavior have identified several candidates that may contribute to their enhanced social cognition. Some of these genes are also associated with social disorders in humans when mutated. The finding suggests that similar genetic pathways affect social cognition across species, and that domestication may have involved selection on these pathways. But following pointing isn't the only way dogs demonstrate sophisticated understanding of human communication. They're also highly attentive to human gaze and eye contact. When humans look at something, dogs follow that gaze, looking at what the human is looking at. This is called gaze following, and while it's not unique to dogs, they do it readily and spontaneously with humans in ways that wolves generally don't. Eye contact itself carries special significance in dog-human communication. When a human makes eye contact with a dog, it signals that communication is directed at them. Studies show that dogs are much more likely to follow a pointing gesture or respond to a command when it's accompanied by eye contact. If a human points while looking away, dogs are less likely to follow the point. They understand that eye contact indicates communicative intent. Interestingly, eye contact between dogs and humans triggers the release of oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, in both species. When you gaze into your dog's eyes, your brain releases oxytocin, and so does your dog's brain. This creates a positive feedback loop, strengthening the bond between you. The same hormone system is involved in human parent-infant bonding, suggesting that the dog-human relationship taps into ancient mammalian bonding mechanisms. Dogs also show sensitivity to more subtle aspects of human behavior. They distinguish between a human who is paying attention and one who is distracted. In one classic experiment, dogs had the opportunity to steal forbidden food. They were much more likely to steal it when the human's eyes were closed or turned away than when the human was watching. This suggests dogs understand that seeing is connected to knowing, that a human who can see them is more likely to catch them breaking a rule. Dogs can even distinguish between a human who has knowledge and one who doesn't. In the guesser-knower paradigm, a dog watches while food is hidden in one of two containers. One human, the knower, watches the hiding. Another human, the guesser, is absent or has their view blocked. When both humans then point to containers, the knower points to the correct container, while the guesser points incorrectly. Dogs preferentially follow the pointing of the knower, the person who actually saw where the food was hidden. This suggests dogs have at least a basic understanding that seeing leads to knowing. The debate continues among researchers about whether this represents true theory of mind, the ability to attribute mental states like knowledge and belief to others, or whether dogs are simply responding to behavioral cues, patterns they've learned through experience. Dogs might not need to think, that person saw the food hidden, so they know where it is, to behave appropriately. They might simply have learned through experience that people who watch hiding events usually point to the correct location. Recent studies have pushed further, investigating whether dogs can understand false beliefs, a key test of theory of mind in human cognitive development. In these studies, dogs watch as food is moved from one location to another, but a human is absent or not looking during the move. When the human returns and points to the original location where they last saw the food, do dogs understand that the human has a mistaken belief about the food's location? The results are mixed and controversial. Some studies suggest dogs show sensitivity to false beliefs, at least under certain conditions. Other studies find no evidence of this understanding. It's possible that different breeds or individuals vary in their abilities, or that the tasks don't adequately capture what dogs are capable of. This remains an active area of research, one that's refining our understanding of the upper limits of canine social cognition. What's clear is that dogs pay extraordinary attention to humans. They watch us constantly, monitoring our behavior, learning our patterns, picking up on subtle cues. Pet dogs spend significant portions of their day simply observing their owners. This attention allows them to learn an enormous amount about human behavior through simple association. If your dog runs to the door when you pick up your keys, they don't need to understand your plans or intentions. They've simply learned that keys predict leaving the house, which might predict a walk or car ride. But some aspects of dog-human communication seem to go beyond simple learned associations. Dogs spontaneously gesture to humans when they want help. They'll look back and forth between an unreachable toy and their owner, or between a closed door and a person, clearly attempting to communicate their desire for assistance. This is called referential communication, using signals to direct another's attention to something in the world, and it's relatively rare in animals. Dogs also adjust their communication based on the human's attentional state. They're more likely to use visual signals, like pawing or bouncing, when a human is watching them, and more likely to use auditory signals, like barking or whining, when the human's attention is elsewhere. This flexibility suggests dogs understand something about how communication works, about the need to get someone's attention before you can communicate with them. The communication isn't entirely one-directional. Dogs have their own signals, and humans often learn to read them. A dog who wants to go out might go stand by the door. A dog who's feeling playful might bring you a toy or perform a play bow, dropping their front end down while keeping their rear up, tail wagging. A dog who's anxious might yawn, lick their lips, or turn their head away. These are elements of dog body language, and observant owners learn to read them. But here's something fascinating and somewhat unsettling. Research shows that humans are actually quite poor at accurately reading dog emotions, just from observing dogs' behavior. In studies where people watch videos of dogs in different emotional states, their assessments of how the dog is feeling are strongly influenced by context, by what's happening around the dog, rather than by the dog's actual behavior and body language. Show people a video of a dog with a person holding a leash, and they say the dog looks happy and excited. Show them the same dog behaving the same way, but with a vacuum cleaner visible instead of a leash, and they say the dog looks stressed and upset. This means we often misinterpret our dog's emotional states, projecting our own interpretations based on what we think they should be feeling, rather than accurately reading what they're actually expressing. It's a humbling finding, one that reminds us that despite thousands of years of shared history, truly understanding another species remains a challenge. Dogs, though, seem to do better at reading us than we do at reading them. While we misread their subtle signals, they're tracking our eye movements, our body orientation, our tone of voice, even our breathing patterns. They're picking up on correlations we're not even aware we're providing. This asymmetry in understanding is worth reflecting on. We often assume we know what our dogs are, thinking and feeling, but the evidence suggests they might understand us better than we understand them. Different breeds show different levels of aptitude for social cognition tasks. Breeds that were developed to work closely with humans, especially breeds like border collies, that were bred to respond to distant gestural commands while herding, tend to excel at tasks involving human communication. Livestock guardian breeds, developed to work independently, protecting flocks from predators without constant human direction, often show less interest in human gestures. This isn't a measure of intelligence, but of specialized adaptation. Different breeds evolved to excel at different tasks, and their cognitive profiles reflect those specializations. Individual differences within breeds also matter enormously. Some dogs are naturally more socially oriented, more attentive to humans, while others are more independent. Training and socialization play crucial roles. Dogs raised with limited human contact, like some shelter dogs, or dogs kept primarily outdoors, may not develop the same level of social cognitive skills as dogs who are raised as family members, constantly interacting with humans. The development of social cognition in dogs follows a fascinating trajectory. Puppies begin showing sensitivity to human gestures at a very young age, by about 8 weeks. This sensitivity continues to develop through adolescence, as puppies gain more experience with humans and learn the specific patterns and habits of their particular human family. By adulthood, a dog who's been well socialized will be exquisitely attuned to their owner's behavior, able to predict what's about to happen based on tiny behavioral cues. This social cognitive sophistication is one of the key reasons dogs integrate so seamlessly into human lives. They're not just tolerant of us, they're actively interested in us, motivated to understand us, equipped with cognitive tools for decoding our behavior. This creates a foundation for genuine interspecies communication, imperfect and asymmetric as it may be. Yet communication and social understanding are only part of the picture of how dogs think. To truly understand the canine mind, we need to explore how dogs remember, how they learn, how they store and retrieve information about their experiences. Memory is the foundation of learning, of adaptation, of personality. Without memory, each moment would be isolated, disconnected from every other moment. There would be no learning from experience, no recognition of familiar individuals, no cumulative growth of knowledge. For a dog, memory allows them to recognize their owner returning home, to learn that sitting on command leads to treats, to remember the route to a favorite park, to develop fear of the veterinary clinic based on previous unpleasant experiences. But what kinds of memory do dogs have? How long do they remember things? What can they remember, and what do they forget? These questions have driven decades of research, revealing a picture of canine memory that's both impressive and, in some ways, surprisingly limited. The simplest form of memory is short-term or working memory, the ability to hold information in mind for a brief period to guide current behavior. In humans, working memory might be keeping a phone number in mind long enough to dial it, or remembering where you parked your car when you come out of a store. Studies of dog working memory using various experimental paradigms suggest it lasts only a few minutes at best, sometimes just seconds. If you hide a treat while your dog watches, then distract them for even a short period, they may struggle to remember where the treat is. This limited working memory might seem like a significant constraint, but it's not unusual in the animal kingdom. Many species show similar patterns. Working memory is metabolically expensive, requiring constant neural activity to maintain information. Evolution tends not to favor capabilities that are costly, unless they provide clear survival benefits. For a dog, remembering moment-to-moment details probably matters less than being able to learn patterns and form long-term associations. And long-term memory is where dogs excel. Long-term memory refers to information stored for extended periods, from hours to years or even a lifetime. Dogs clearly possess robust long-term memory. They remember their owners after years of separation. They remember locations of buried bones or cached food. They remember routines and patterns, anticipating daily events like meals or walks. They remember commands and trained behaviors, even if they haven't performed them in months or years. One remarkable demonstration of canine long-term memory comes from studies of dogs who learned names for objects. Some dogs, particularly border collies, have been trained to learn dozens or even hundreds of object names. The most famous is probably Chaser, a border collie who learned the names of over 1,000 different toys and objects. When researchers tested Chaser, she could reliably retrieve the correct object when given its name, even when it was mixed among many other objects. Even more impressively, when researchers tested these word-learning dogs after gaps of months or even years without exposure to specific objects, the dogs still remembered the names. 5 dogs who had participated in research learning object names were retested 2 years after their initial training. 4 of the 5 dogs still remembered and could correctly identify some of the objects they had been taught years earlier. Their performance was above chance, demonstrating genuine retention over a substantial period with no reinforcement or practice. This suggests dogs can form what memory researchers call declarative or explicit memories, memories of facts and events that can be consciously recalled. In humans, declarative memory is contrasted with procedural memory, memory for skills and habits that operate largely automatically. Dogs clearly have procedural memory too. Learning to sit on command, to walk on a leash without pulling, to navigate an agility course, all involve procedural memory. These learned skills become automatic with practice. But perhaps the most intriguing question about dog memory is whether they possess episodic memory, the ability to remember specific events from their past, complete with contextual details about what happened, where it happened, and when it happened. Episodic memory is what allows you to remember your last birthday party, your first day at a job, a conversation you had yesterday. It's memory of personal experiences, of moments in your life. For many years, researchers doubted whether animals had true episodic memory, largely because episodic memory in humans is closely tied to language and conscious reflection. How could we possibly know if an animal remembers a specific event in the way we do? But in recent years, researchers have developed clever tests for what they call episodic-like memory. Memory that has the key features of episodic memory, even if we can't be certain it involves the same conscious experience. One study tested dogs' ability to remember unexpected events. Dogs were trained to imitate actions they saw their owner perform. Watch the owner touch an umbrella. Then, the dog would be given the command, "Do it," and the dog would touch the umbrella too. This became routine, predictable. But then, the researchers changed the test. After the dog watched their owner perform an action, instead of being asked to imitate, the dog was told to lie down. This happened repeatedly until the dogs expected to lie down after watching an action. Then came the critical test. After watching their owner perform an action and being told to lie down, the dog was unexpectedly asked to imitate the action. They hadn't been planning to remember it for later imitation. Would they remember what their owner had done? Remarkably, most dogs successfully imitated the action, even after a delay of 1 minute. After an hour, their performance declined, but was still above chance. This suggests dogs can encode and retrieve memories of events, even when they didn't know they would need to remember them. This is considered evidence of episodic-like memory, because the dogs had to remember specific details of a specific event. They couldn't rely on habits or routines. They had to mentally replay what they had witnessed and use that memory to guide their current behavior. It's not absolute proof that dogs experience memory the way we do, with conscious recollection of past experiences. But it suggests their memory is richer and more flexible than simple association learning. Dogs also appear to have some sense of time, though how they represent time is unclear. They learn routines tied to time of day. They know when it's usually time for dinner, for a walk, for their owner to come home from work. They react differently to owners who've been gone for an hour versus several days, suggesting they can distinguish different durations of separation. But whether they have a conceptual understanding of time, whether they can think about past and future the way humans do, remains unknown. The development of memory changes across a dog's lifespan. Puppies are learning constantly, forming new memories at a rapid pace. Everything is new, and their brains are highly plastic, making it easy to form new neural connections. This is why early socialization is so crucial. The experiences a puppy has during their first few months create memories and associations that can last a lifetime. As dogs mature into adults, their rate of learning may slow slightly, but they continue to form new memories and can learn new behaviors throughout their adult lives. The adage that you can't teach an old dog new tricks is demonstrably false. Adult and even senior dogs can learn new commands, new behaviors, new routines. It may take more repetition than it would with a younger dog, but learning remains possible. However, as dogs enter old age, cognitive changes become apparent. Senior dogs may show signs of canine cognitive dysfunction, a condition similar to Alzheimer's disease in humans. Affected dogs might get confused in familiar places, forget learned routines, have accidents in the house despite being well house-trained for years, show changes in sleep-wake cycles, or seem less interested in interaction. Not all old dogs develop severe cognitive dysfunction, but the risk increases with age. Research on preventing or slowing cognitive decline in dogs has identified several factors that seem protective. Regular physical exercise, especially aerobic exercise, appears beneficial. Mental enrichment, including training, puzzle toys, and novel experiences, also helps maintain cognitive function. Some dietary interventions, including antioxidant supplementation and omega-3 fatty acids, show promise. Social interaction and maintaining a routine also seem to support cognitive health in aging dogs. The study of dog memory continues to evolve. Recent research using techniques like delayed match-to-sample tests, where dogs must remember a sample stimulus and later choose it from among distractors, is revealing more about the capacity and duration of different types of canine memory. Some studies examine whether dogs remember the source of information, whether they can distinguish between something they learned by seeing versus something they learned by smelling. Understanding dog memory has practical implications. Training methods are more effective when they account for how dogs learn and remember. Dogs learn best through consistent, repeated associations. They remember emotional experiences particularly strongly, which is why traumatic events can create lasting fears and phobias. They may not remember specific details of what happened 5 minutes ago, but they'll remember that the veterinary clinic is a place where unpleasant things happen because the emotional memory is strong, even if the episodic details are vague. Memory is also central to the bond between dogs and humans. Your dog remembers you. They remember your scent, your voice, your typical patterns of behavior. They remember that you're the source of food, of walks, of affection. These memories create expectations, and the fulfillment of those expectations reinforces the bond. When you come home and your dog greets you enthusiastically, that greeting is driven by memory, by the accumulation of all the previous times you came home and something good happened. But memory doesn't operate in isolation. It intertwines with emotion, with learning, with perception. And this brings us to a crucial question about the inner life of dogs. Do they have emotions in any sense we would recognize? And if so, what emotions do they experience? The question of whether dogs have emotions might seem almost insulting to anyone who's lived with a dog. Of course, dogs have emotions. You can see joy in their wagging tails and bouncing gait when you come home. You can see fear in their body language when they encounter something frightening. You can see contentment in their relaxed posture as they rest beside you. The emotional life of dogs seems self-evident. Yet, from a scientific standpoint, the question is more complex. We can't directly access another being's subjective experience. We can observe their behavior, measure their physiology, scan their brains, but we can't know with certainty what they're feeling. This is true even for other humans, but we bridge that gap with language. A person can tell you they're happy or sad or anxious. A dog cannot. Nevertheless, the evidence that dogs experience genuine emotions, something more than mere stimulus-response patterns, is compelling. When scientists examine the brain structures associated with emotion in mammals, they find that dogs possess all the same key regions that humans do. The amygdala, crucial for processing fear and other emotions, is present and functions similarly. The limbic system, the ancient emotional center of the mammalian brain, is structurally comparable. The neurochemicals involved in emotion, neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, hormones like cortisol and oxytocin, are the same molecules doing the same jobs in dog and human brains. From an evolutionary standpoint, emotions serve functions that are just as relevant to dogs as to humans. Fear motivates avoiding danger. Joy reinforces beneficial behaviors. Anxiety promotes caution in uncertain situations. Social emotions like affection strengthen bonds within groups. Dogs, as social mammals descended from pack-hunting ancestors, would benefit from having emotional systems that facilitate social cohesion and cooperative behavior. There's no reason to think evolution would have equipped humans with emotions, but denied them to dogs. What emotions do dogs likely experience? Most researchers agree on the basic emotions. Dogs almost certainly experience fear, the emotion that motivates escape from threats. Dogs clearly can be frightened by loud noises, by unfamiliar situations, by aggressive conspecifics. The behavioral and physiological signs of fear in dogs mirror those in other mammals, including increased heart rate, stress hormone release, and avoidance behaviors. Dogs also likely experience joy or happiness, the positive emotion associated with rewards and pleasurable experiences. The sight of a dog playing, of a dog greeting their beloved owner, of a dog anticipating a treat or a walk, suggests an experience that goes beyond simple approach motivation. Their behavior shows enthusiasm, exuberance, what certainly appears to be a positive emotional state. Anxiety, a state of apprehension about potential future threats, is also evident in dogs. Dogs can develop anxiety about specific situations, like being left alone or traveling in cars. They show signs of stress and distress even before the feared event occurs, suggesting they're anticipating and worrying about what might happen. This is distinct from immediate fear in response to a present threat. Many dog owners believe their dogs can feel guilt, particularly when caught doing something forbidden. The classic scenario is coming home to find your dog has destroyed something, and the dog greets you with a submissive, seemingly guilty expression. But research suggests this isn't actually guilt. In studies where dogs were forbidden to take a treat, and then owners were told, incorrectly, that their dog had disobeyed, the dogs showed guilty behaviors, even though they hadn't actually done anything wrong. The dogs were responding to their owner's accusatory tone and body language, not to their own transgression. What looks like guilt is more likely fear or apprehension about the owner's reaction. More complex social emotions remain debated. Do dogs experience jealousy, that feeling of resentment when another receives attention you desire? Some studies suggest they do. When owners give attention and affection to what appears to be another dog, even a toy dog, their real dog often shows behaviors consistent with jealousy, trying to push between the owner and the rival, trying to get attention for themselves. But whether this reflects a true emotional experience or simply frustration and attention-seeking is unclear. Do dogs feel love? Many owners would say yes without hesitation. the bond between dogs and their owners certainly has emotional components on both sides. Dogs seek proximity to their owners, show distress at separation, display joy at reunion, seem to find comfort in their owner's presence. Brain imaging studies show activation of reward centers when dogs see their owners or smell their scent. This pattern of attachment looks similar to the bonds between human parents and children, bonds we wouldn't hesitate to describe as involving love. While we can't know if dogs' subjective experience matches what humans call love, the behavioral and neural evidence suggests something analogous. Dogs are also sensitive to human emotions. They respond differently to happy versus angry human faces. They react to human emotional vocalizations. Studies show that dogs exposed to human stress sweat samples behave differently than dogs exposed to neutral sweat samples, suggesting they can detect and respond to human emotional states through scent. This emotional sensitivity likely evolved because dogs who could read human emotions could better navigate their relationships with humans, responding appropriately to a pleased owner versus an angry one. However, there's an important caveat about human perception of dog emotions. Humans tend to anthropomorphize, to attribute human-like emotions and thoughts to dogs based on superficial similarities in behavior. A dog that curls up next to you when you're crying might be offering comfort, but they might also simply be responding to your unusual behavior with curiosity, or seeking closeness because they're uncertain about the situation. A dog that stares into your eyes might be expressing affection, or they might be trying to read your intentions because eye contact predicts human behavior. Research on human perception of dog emotions reveals that we're heavily influenced by context rather than by the dog's actual behavior. When people watch videos of dogs and try to assess the dog's emotional states, their judgments are swayed more by what's happening in the environment than by the dog's body language. This means we often misread what our dogs are feeling, interpreting their behavior through our own emotional lens, rather than accurately perceiving their state. Dogs have their own ways of expressing emotion, a vocabulary of body language that doesn't always match human expressions. A relaxed, open-mouthed expression that might look like a smile can indicate a calm, happy dog, but it can also be a stress signal in other contexts. A wagging tail is often assumed to indicate happiness, but dogs also wag when they're aroused, anxious, or even preparing to be aggressive. The position, speed, and direction of the wag carry meaning that many humans miss. Cultural differences in how people keep and interact with dogs affect both dog emotional development and human ability to read dog emotions. Research comparing people from cultures where dogs are kept primarily as pets, living in the home as family members, versus cultures where dogs are kept more as working animals with less intimate human contact, found differences in how well people could identify dog emotions from facial expressions. People from pet-keeping cultures were generally better at reading dog emotions, probably because they have more experience observing dogs closely. The study of dog emotions continues to advance as researchers develop new methods. The Dog Facial Action Coding System, or DogFaCS, provides a standardized way to objectively describe and measure dog facial expressions. Researchers can code specific muscle movements in dog faces and correlate them with different emotional states and contexts. This is revealing that dogs have a rich array of facial expressions, more than many people realize. Physiological measures also help researchers assess dog emotions more objectively. Heart rate variability the variation in time between heartbeats, is associated with emotional state. Lower variability often indicates stress. Cortisol levels in saliva or blood provide a measure of stress over longer periods. Body temperature measured through thermal imaging can detect arousal and emotional changes. These objective measures complement behavioral observations, giving researchers multiple windows into dogs' emotional experiences. One particularly interesting area of research examines whether dogs have positive and negative cognitive biases, whether their emotional state affects how they interpret ambiguous situations. In studies where dogs learn that one location always has a treat and another never does, they're then tested with an ambiguous middle location. Dogs that have been experiencing more stressful conditions or have anxiety disorders are less likely to approach the ambiguous location, as if they pessimistically assume it won't have a treat. Dogs in more positive circumstances are more optimistic, more willing to check the ambiguous location. This suggests their emotional state genuinely affects their expectations and decision-making. Understanding dog emotions has important practical implications. Training methods that induce fear or anxiety, like harsh corrections or punishment, not only cause short-term distress, but can have long-term effects on a dog's emotional well-being. Dogs trained with punishment-based methods show more stress-related behaviors and may develop fear or anxiety about training contexts or even about their owner. Positive reinforcement training, which builds on dogs' natural tendencies toward cooperation and social learning, promotes better emotional well-being alongside effective learning. The emotional lives of dogs, then, appear to be genuine, if not as complex as human emotions. Dogs experience feelings that motivate their behavior, that affect their relationships, that shape their experience of the world. They feel fear and joy, anxiety and contentment, affection and frustration. Whether they experience the full range of human emotions, whether their subjective experience matches ours, remains uncertain. But the evidence clearly indicates they're not mere automatons, responding mechanically to stimuli. They're feeling beings whose emotional experiences matter to their well-being. And those emotional experiences continue even during a state that might seem like simple unconsciousness. When your dog sleeps, when they enter the strange world of dreams, something remarkable happens in their mind. You've seen it. Your dog is sleeping, and suddenly their paws start moving as if they're running. Their whiskers twitch. They might make small sounds, little barks or whimpers. Their eyes move rapidly beneath their closed lids. For a moment, you wonder if you should wake them. Are they having a nightmare? Are they okay? Then, just as suddenly, the movement stops. They return to still, peaceful sleep. What just happened? Your dog was almost certainly dreaming, and the science behind canine dreams reveals that dogs' sleeping minds are far more active and interesting than we might have imagined. The study of sleep in dogs has revealed that they experience sleep stages remarkably similar to those in humans. When dogs sleep, they cycle through different stages, each characterized by distinct patterns of brain activity, each serving different functions. The first stage is drowsiness, that borderland between waking and sleeping, where the dog's eyes may be partly open, their muscles still have some tone, and they can easily be roused. Then comes slow wave sleep, a deeper stage where brain waves become slower and more synchronized. Body temperature drops slightly, and muscles relax further. This is restorative sleep, when the body repairs itself, when energy is conserved, when physical recovery happens. But the most intriguing stage is rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep. During REM sleep, the brain becomes highly active, generating fast, irregular brain waves that look remarkably similar to the brain waves during waking. Yet, the body is deeply relaxed, almost paralyzed. The eyes move rapidly beneath the eyelids, darting back and forth. This is the stage where most dreaming occurs, both in humans and, researchers believe, in dogs. The evidence that dogs dream comes from multiple sources. First, there's the similarity in brainwave patterns. When scientists attach electrodes to sleeping dogs and record their brain activity using electroencephalography, or EEG, they find that during REM sleep, dogs show high-frequency, low-amplitude brainwaves, essentially identical to those seen in dreaming humans. This suggests similar underlying processes are occurring. Second, there's the behavioral evidence. During REM sleep, dogs often twitch, move their legs as if running, vocalize quietly, and show those characteristic rapid eye movements. These behaviors suggest the brain is generating complex, action-oriented mental activity. They're acting out, in small, incomplete ways, behaviors they would perform while awake. Third, there are studies that have temporarily disabled the part of the brain that normally paralyzes muscles during REM sleep. This research, conducted primarily on cats, but with similar findings in dogs, shows that when this paralysis mechanism is disabled, sleeping animals physically act out their dreams. Cats stalk invisible prey, groom themselves, explore their environment, all while their brainwaves indicate they're in REM sleep. Dogs, in similar studies, run, play bow, investigate things, perform breed-specific behaviors like pointing or herding motions. These animals are clearly experiencing something that drives coordinated, purposeful behavior. They're not just twitching randomly, they're executing complex action sequences. The simplest explanation is that they're dreaming about doing these activities, and, without the normal muscular paralysis, they're physically performing them. What do dogs dream about? We can't ask them, of course, but researchers have made educated guesses based on both the behaviors dogs show during sleep and on studies of dreaming in other animals. Research on rats revealed that when rats run through a maze while awake, specific patterns of neural activity occur in their hippocampus, the brain region involved in spatial navigation and memory. During sleep, researchers recorded the same patterns, playing out in the same sequence. The rats appeared to be mentally rerunning the maze, rehearsing the route. Their brains were replaying and consolidating the experiences of their waking hours. Dogs likely do something similar. Psychologists and neuroscientists who study canine cognition suggest that dogs probably dream about their daily experiences. A dog who spent the afternoon playing fetch might dream about chasing the ball. A dog who went to a new park might dream about exploring and sniffing that new environment. A dog who had a stressful encounter with another dog might replay that encounter during sleep. Interestingly, smaller dogs appear to dream more frequently than larger dogs, though their dreams are shorter. A toy poodle might enter REM sleep and begin dreaming every 10 minutes or so, with each dream lasting about a minute. A large dog, like a Labrador, might only dream once every hour or hour and a half, but their dreams might last 5 to 10 minutes. The reason for this size-related difference isn't entirely clear, but it correlates with metabolic rate and overall sleep patterns that also vary with body size. Age also affects dreaming. Puppies and very old dogs tend to show more movement during sleep than adult dogs. In puppies, this is because the brain structure that paralyzes muscles during REM sleep, called the pons, is still developing. It's not fully efficient yet, so puppies physically act out their dreams more. In elderly dogs, the pons may become less effective with age, leading to more visible dream-related movement. Human babies show similar patterns. They twitch and move a lot during sleep, more than adults do, because their motor control systems are still maturing. The parallel between human infant sleep and puppy sleep suggests similar developmental processes. Can dogs have nightmares? Almost certainly, yes. Dogs can have unpleasant experiences while awake, experiences that trigger fear or anxiety. These experiences create memories, and those memories can be reactivated during sleep. A dog who was abused or traumatized might have dreams involving those traumatic events. A dog who has a phobia of thunderstorms might dream about storms. During these nightmares, dogs might whine, whimper, or show signs of distress. Should you wake a dog having a nightmare? Most experts say no. Waking a dog during REM sleep can startle and disorient them. They may not immediately recognize where they are or who you are, and in that confused state, they might react defensively, possibly even snapping or biting. The better approach is to softly call their name from a distance and let them wake naturally. Then you can provide comfort and reassurance. The function of dreaming in dogs, as in humans, probably relates to memory consolidation and emotional processing. During sleep, particularly during REM sleep, the brain replays experiences from waking life. This replay helps strengthen important memories, helps integrate new learning with existing knowledge, helps process emotional experiences. Dogs who sleep after training sessions often show better retention of what they learned compared to dogs who don't get adequate sleep. Sleep is when learning becomes solidified, moved from temporary storage into more permanent memory. Dreams may also serve a role in problem-solving and creativity, though this is more speculative. In humans, we sometimes wake with solutions to problems that eluded us while awake. The sleeping brain, freed from the constraints of waking logic and distraction, can make novel connections, can explore possibilities that waking thought might dismiss. Whether dogs experience anything analogous is unknown, but if they do, their dreams might help them navigate social challenges or remember complex environments. One particularly touching hypothesis, proposed by researchers including Harvard psychologist Deirdre Barrett, suggests that dogs likely dream about their owners. Dogs are intensely social animals who form deep attachments to their human families. Their owners are central to their daily lives, involved in their most important activities like playing, eating, walking. It would be strange if such salient, emotionally significant figures didn't appear in dogs' dreams. The brain imaging studies showing activation of reward centers when dogs smell their owner's scent suggest that owners are indeed important to dogs' mental lives. It's reasonable to think that this importance extends into dreams. So, when your dog is sleeping peacefully beside you, when their paws twitch and they make those soft sleeping sounds, they might very well be dreaming of you. They might be replaying that game of fetch you played earlier, or the walk you took together, or simply the comfort of being near you. Their sleeping brain is processing their waking experiences, consolidating memories, and quite possibly reinforcing the bond they feel with you. The sleep and dreams of dogs remind us that even in unconsciousness, their minds remain active, working, experiencing. The brain never fully shuts down. It cycles through different modes of operation, each serving crucial functions. And in those moments of REM sleep, when the brain is most active, dogs may enter worlds as rich and complex as anything they experience while awake, guided by memory, shaped by emotion, creating experiences that are, at their core, dreams. Yet dreams are just one aspect of how dogs process information, how they solve problems, how they navigate their world. To fully understand canine cognition, we need to look at how dogs think while they're awake, at the puzzles they can solve, at the limits and capabilities of their reasoning abilities. Intelligence is a slippery concept, even when applied to humans. We argue about what it means, how to measure it, whether there's one kind of intelligence or many. When we try to apply the concept to other species, the challenges multiply. A dog's intelligence isn't designed for calculus or chess. It's shaped by evolutionary pressures, relevant to a social carnivore descended from hunters, a creature that needed to track prey, coordinate with pack members, navigate complex social hierarchies, and, eventually, cooperate with humans. So, when we talk about dog intelligence, we're really talking about a collection of different cognitive abilities, some of which dogs excel at, others where they show limitations. The picture that emerges from decades of research is of an animal that's cognitively sophisticated in domain-specific ways, but not as generally flexible as humans, or even some of our primate relatives. One domain where dogs show clear cognitive ability is spatial cognition, understanding and navigating physical space. Dogs can learn complex routes, remember locations of important resources like food caches or favorite resting spots, and navigate back to home, even from unfamiliar starting points. Experiments using the canine sand maze, where dogs must learn the location of hidden food in a large sandbox using spatial cues, show that dogs can form spatial maps and remember locations over time. Performance declines with age, similar to spatial memory decline in aging humans. But young adult dogs typically perform well. Dogs also understand basic physical principles about how objects behave. They know that objects continue to exist even when hidden, a concept called object permanence. If you hide a toy under a blanket, a dog knows the toy is still there. This might seem obvious, but it's actually a cognitive achievement that human infants don't master until several months old. Dogs understand something about object support and gravity. They know that an object needs to be supported or it will fall. They can solve simple problems involving barriers, like going around a fence to reach a goal instead of futilely trying to push through the fence. These forms of physical cognition allow dogs to navigate their physical world effectively. However, dogs show limitations in more complex physical reasoning. Tests involving string pulling, where a dog must figure out which string to pull to obtain food, reveal that dogs often struggle with these tasks compared to some other species. They may have difficulty understanding the continuous connection between string and food when the string makes complex loops or crosses other strings. They tend to rely on learned rules or trial and error rather than reasoning about the underlying physical relationships. Dogs show variable performance on causal reasoning tasks. If a dog watches a ball rolled behind a screen, and then the screen is lifted to reveal the ball in a different location than expected. Dogs may notice the violation of expectation, but they don't always respond strongly. They may not show the surprise or increased attention that would indicate robust causal reasoning about the ball's trajectory and final location. In social cognition, as we've discussed, dogs excel. Their ability to understand human communicative gestures, to follow pointing, to read human attention and intentions, represents sophisticated social intelligence. But even here, there are limits. Dogs don't seem to understand false beliefs in the way that 4-year-old human children do. They may not fully grasp that another individual can have knowledge that differs from their own knowledge of reality. One area where dogs show interesting abilities is in learning object labels, the names of things. While most dogs learn a handful of words, some exceptional individuals can learn hundreds. The record holder was Chaser, the border collie we mentioned earlier, who learned over 1,000 object names. She could identify toys by their names, could understand sentences combining verbs and nouns, could learn new words through a process of exclusion, figuring out that a new name must apply to the one new object in a group of familiar objects. These word-learning dogs provide insights into the cognitive prerequisites for language. They demonstrate that at least some dogs have capacities for categorization, for mapping sounds to concepts, for using exclusionary reasoning that are similar to the capacities human infants use when learning language. The dogs don't develop full language, of course. They understand words as labels, but don't create their own symbolic communication, or understand grammar in the way humans do. Breed differences in cognitive abilities are substantial and reflect the different jobs breeds were developed to perform. Border collies, bred for herding, excel at tasks requiring attention to subtle cues, quick decision-making, and learning complex sequences. Beagles, bred for scent tracking, are particularly skilled at olfactory discrimination tasks. Livestock guardian breeds like Great Pyrenees, bred to work independently, may be less motivated to follow human cues, but excellent at making independent decisions about how to protect their charges. These breed differences don't represent differences in general intelligence, but rather differences in specialized abilities and motivations. A border collie might seem smarter than a beagle in a training context, where following human cues quickly is rewarded, but the beagle might vastly outperform the border collie in a scent discrimination task. Each breed's intelligence is adapted to its purpose. Individual differences within breeds are also enormous. Just as human intelligence varies widely, so does dog intelligence. Some dogs learn new commands in just a few repetitions, while others need dozens of repetitions. Some dogs solve novel problems quickly, while others rely more heavily on learned routines. Personality factors like persistence, curiosity, and attention span interact with cognitive abilities, affecting overall problem-solving success. One controversial area involves social versus non-social problem-solving. Some researchers have argued that domestication enhanced dogs' social cognition, their ability to work with humans, but at a cost to their independent problem-solving abilities. Studies comparing dogs to wolves on tasks solvable without human help sometimes find that wolves outperform dogs, particularly when the task requires persistence or innovation. Dogs, when faced with a difficult problem, often turn to humans for help, rather than continuing to work on the problem independently. This might reflect not reduced intelligence, but altered motivation, a tendency to rely on social solutions over individual ones. However, this characterization is debated. Dogs do solve many problems independently. Service dogs, working dogs, and even pet dogs regularly figure out how to open doors, how to access food in clever ways, how to communicate their needs. The degree to which dogs are independent problem solvers versus social cooperators varies by individual, by breed, by context, and by their learning history. Training and enrichment significantly affect cognitive development and maintenance. Dogs raised in enriched environments with varied experiences, training, social interaction, and mental challenges tend to perform better on cognitive tests than dogs raised in barren, restricted environments. This is similar to findings in many species, including humans. The brain is shaped by experience, and varied, stimulating experiences promote cognitive development. Aging affects cognition in predictable ways. Young adult dogs typically show peak performance on cognitive tasks. As dogs age past about 7 years, depending on size, subtle declines may begin. Older dogs may show decreased flexibility in learning, taking longer to learn new tasks, or having more difficulty switching between learned rules. Memory declines become more apparent, particularly working memory and learning of new information. However, long-term memories and well-practiced skills often remain intact. Canine cognitive dysfunction, the dog equivalent of dementia, affects a substantial portion of very old dogs. The condition involves more than normal aging-related decline. Affected dogs may become disoriented in familiar places, have disrupted sleep-wake cycles, forget house training, show decreased interaction with family members, and appear generally confused. The underlying brain changes involve protein deposits, vascular changes, and neurodegeneration similar to human Alzheimer's disease. Research into preventing or treating cognitive decline in dogs has practical applications, both for canine welfare and for understanding human aging. Dogs age more quickly than humans, but show similar patterns of cognitive decline, making them useful models for studying interventions. Studies suggest that cognitive training, physical exercise, antioxidant supplementation, and maintaining social engagement all potentially help preserve cognitive function in aging dogs. The question of whether dogs have theory of mind, whether they understand that others have mental states like knowledge, beliefs, and intentions, remains actively debated. As we discussed earlier, dogs show sensitivity to human knowledge and attention in various experimental paradigms. They behave differently toward people who can see them versus people who cannot. They preferentially follow pointing from people who witnessed food being hidden versus people who didn't. But do these behaviors require attributing mental states, or can they be explained by learned associations and behavioral reading? This is the central debate. Some researchers argue that dogs have at least basic theory of mind, at least level 1 perspective taking, understanding what others can and cannot perceive. Others argue that dogs might simply have learned behavioral rules, like, people who are facing toward me are more likely to give me food, or following the pointing of someone who was present when food was hidden is usually rewarded. Testing true theory of mind is extraordinarily difficult, even with human children. With non-verbal animals like dogs, it may be impossible to definitively prove mental state attribution, rather than sophisticated behavioral learning. The debate continues, with researchers on both sides marshalling evidence and refining experimental designs. What's clear is that regardless of whether dogs possess true theory of mind, they're remarkably skilled at reading and responding to human behavior. They pay attention to subtle cues we're often not even aware we're providing. They learn complex patterns of human behavior and use that learning to predict what we'll do next. And they've evolved, or learned, to use this information to coordinate their behavior with ours in ways that make them uniquely effective human companions. The intelligence of dogs, then, is not a single number or simple ranking. It's a profile of strengths and weaknesses, of exceptional abilities in some domains and limitations in others. Dogs think like dogs, not like small, furry humans, or like wolves with better social skills. They have their own cognitive architecture, their own ways of processing information, their own kinds of intelligence adapted to their evolutionary niche and their particular role as humanity's oldest animal partner. Throughout this journey into the canine mind, we've explored brain structure and function, sensory capabilities, memory systems, emotional experiences, dreams, and problem-solving abilities. We've seen that dogs are neither simple automatons nor equivalent to humans in fur coats. They're something wonderfully unique, shaped by millions of years of canid evolution and tens of thousands of years of domestication. The story of canine cognition is, in many ways, a story of convergent evolution of two very different species, humans and dogs, evolving to understand each other in ways that no other interspecies relationship quite matches. Humans didn't evolve to understand dogs, and dogs' wolf ancestors didn't evolve to understand humans. Yet, here we are, sharing our lives, our homes, our affection. The bond between humans and dogs likely began opportunistically, wolves scavenging at the edges of human settlements, humans tolerating the presence of animals that might warn of dangers or help with hunting. But over time, something remarkable happened. Humans began selectively breeding wolves that were less fearful, more tolerant, more willing to cooperate. And those proto-dogs evolved, both through intentional selection and natural selection, to become better at living with humans. This process changed them profoundly. It changed their behavior, making them more social, more playful, more juvenile in some ways throughout their lives. It changed their physical appearance, leading to the enormous diversity of dog breeds we see today. And it changed their minds, their cognitive architecture, tuning them to pay attention to human behavior, to respond to human cues, to form attachments to individual humans. The changes weren't only physical or behavioral, they occurred at the genetic level. Studies comparing dog and wolf genomes have identified genes that differ between the two species, genes involved in brain development, in behavior, in how the nervous system develops. Some of these same genes, when mutated in humans, are associated with developmental disorders affecting social behavior. The domestication of dogs may have involved selection on genetic pathways that are fundamental to social cognition across mammals. Recent studies examining the heritability of social cognitive abilities in dogs find that genetics accounts for about 40 to 50% of the variation in abilities, like following pointing gestures or maintaining attention to human faces. This is similar to heritability estimates for intelligence in humans. It means that while experience and learning matter enormously, there's also a genetic component, an inherited predisposition that makes some dogs more naturally attuned to humans than others. But genetics alone doesn't make a dog. The development of the canine mind, unfolds across the dog's lifetime, shaped continuously by experience. Puppies go through critical developmental periods when particular types of experience are especially important. The socialization period, roughly from 3 weeks to 12 or 14 weeks of age, is when puppies most easily form attachments and learn that various stimuli, including humans, other animals, and environmental features, are safe and normal. Experiences during this window have lasting effects on behavior and cognition. As puppies mature, their cognitive abilities continue to develop. Young puppies are already sensitive to human pointing gestures, but their ability to use this information improves with age and experience. Their memory capacities develop, their attention span lengthens, their impulse control improves. By adulthood, a well-socialized dog possesses a sophisticated understanding of their human family's routines, preferences, and individual characteristics. This understanding is bi-directional. Humans also learn to read their dogs, to understand individual quirks and preferences, to communicate effectively. The relationship becomes a dance where both parties adjust to each other, where meaning emerges from repeated interaction and mutual adaptation. It's not perfect communication. We've seen that humans often misread dog emotions, that dogs may not understand all that we think they understand. But it's effective enough that the relationship works, that dogs and humans can coordinate their behavior in complex ways. The cognitive abilities we've explored, from scent detection to memory to social cognition, all serve this fundamental function of navigating a life intertwined with humans. A dog's extraordinary nose lets them gather information about their environment and their human companions. Their memory allows them to learn from experience, to anticipate events, to recognize individuals. Their social cognition lets them decode human behavior and respond appropriately. Their emotions create the bonds that make the relationship meaningful rather than merely functional. In the modern world, dogs fill roles that range from beloved family members to highly trained working partners. Service dogs assist people with disabilities, performing tasks like guiding the blind, alerting to seizures, or providing mobility support. Therapy dogs provide comfort in hospitals, nursing homes, and schools. Detection dogs find explosives, drugs, diseases, and contraband. Search and rescue dogs locate missing persons. Each of these roles depends on the cognitive capabilities we've explored, capabilities that humans have learned to develop through training and partnership. The study of canine cognition continues to advance rapidly. New technologies like portable EEG systems and functional MRI allow researchers to peer into the thinking brain as never before. Large-scale citizen science projects collect data on thousands of dogs, revealing patterns that small laboratory studies might miss. Researchers are investigating everything from how dogs categorize objects, to whether they understand fairness, to how they learn by watching other dogs. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of how dogs think, but mysteries remain. We still don't fully understand what it's like to be a dog, to experience a world dominated by scent rather than sight, to think in ways unconstrained by language, to have such extraordinary sensitivity to human behavior. The subjective experience of a dog, their inner life, remains something we can only infer, never directly access. Yet that unknowability doesn't diminish the relationship. Perhaps it even enriches it. The dog lying beside you is both familiar and mysterious, a companion you've shared years with, yet a being whose fundamental experience of reality differs from yours. They're an individual with their own personality, their own preferences, their own way of being in the world. And somehow, despite all the differences, despite the vast evolutionary distance between primates and canids, you've formed a bond. That bond is built on thousands of years of shared history, on genetic changes in both species, on learning and adaptation and mutual understanding. It's built on the dog's cognitive abilities, their capacity to learn from you, to read your emotions, to remember your routines, to feel affection for you. And it's built on your reciprocal abilities, your capacity to care for them, to find meaning in their presence, to see them not as simple animals, but as individuals deserving of respect and kindness. The canine mind is a wonder of evolution, a testament to what's possible when species interact intensively over thousands of generations. It's a mind that can detect a single drop of blood in 5 liters of water, that can remember hundreds of object names, that can read human gestures better than chimpanzees, that dreams of chasing tennis balls and being with you. It's a mind both alien and familiar, simple in some ways and surprisingly sophisticated in others. As science continues to unveil the mechanisms behind canine cognition, as we learn more about how their brains work, how their senses operate, how they think and feel and remember, we gain not just knowledge, but a deeper appreciation. We see more clearly what remarkable creatures dogs are. We understand better how to care for them, train them, enrich their lives. We recognize more fully that they're not merely objects or property, but sentient beings whose welfare matters. And perhaps most importantly, understanding how dogs think deepens the bond between us. When you recognize that your dog's enthusiastic sniffing on walks is how they read their environment, you're more patient about letting them sniff. When you understand that dogs remember emotionally charged events, even if they don't remember all the details, you're more thoughtful about the experiences you provide. When you realize they truly do seem to dream about you, that you're important enough to appear in their sleeping mind, the relationship takes on new meaning. So the next time you watch your dog sleep, twitching and whimpering softly, you'll know they're likely dreaming, perhaps about the day's adventures, perhaps about you. When they greet you with such enthusiasm after you've been gone, you'll understand that they remember you, that your scent activates reward centers in their brain, that their joy is genuine. When they seem to understand what you want, almost before you ask, you'll appreciate the cognitive sophistication that allows them to read your subtle cues. The canine mind remains, in important ways, a mystery. We can measure brain activity and test cognitive abilities, but we can't know what it feels like to be a dog, to experience consciousness in a canine way. That gap in understanding, that fundamental otherness, is something to respect, even to celebrate. Dogs are not humans. They think like dogs, and that's exactly as it should be. Thank you for joining me tonight on this exploration of how dogs think, of the science behind the companions who share our lives. If these gentle explorations into the natural world help you unwind at the end of your day, if they give you a moment of peace or spark your curiosity, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to Bedtime Biology. Share your thoughts in the comments. What surprises you most about your dog's mind? What do you wonder about how they think? Until next time, rest well, and give your dog an extra scratch behind the ears. They're thinking about you more than you might realize.